Hey there, Legal Tea listeners. This is your host, Jenny Roselle. Welcome back for another episode of Legal Tea. Today's topic is a current trend, something going on in the current time that is pertinent to my little estate and elder law world. Today's topic is on unclaimed property. And in case you have no idea what I'm talking about, I found a presentation, and funny enough, it was released by the Indiana Attorney General's office, and it's only funny because I live in Indiana. And that presentation explained what the Unclaimed Property Act is, its purpose, etc. And according to that report, the purpose of the act is to, quote, protect the interests and property rights of the lost owner, to relieve the holders from the expense and liability associated with the property, and to ensure that any economic windfalls benefit the public, not the individual holder, end quote. So what does all that mean? Basically, it's a one-stop shop for collecting property of state citizens that has not been claimed. For example, say a third party owes to a state citizen, and that third party sent them a check, but that the person has not cashed the check. That's a perfect example of that money would get distributed over to the Unclaimed Property Fund. According to the report, the holder of the unclaimed property holds the property for 25 years and actively attempts to locate the owner of the property. After 25 years, the funds are absorbed in a general fund and can no longer be claimed. While the property, which is usually money, is held by the state, though it is, quote, used for the good of the citizens, end quote. And what does that mean? Your guess is as good as mine, but I'm certain there are some requirements and oversight. At least that's what I'm going to tell myself. By the way, all of this is from that Indiana report, but I am sure most states are fairly similar in how they operate. Before we go much more deep, the reason we're talking about this topic today is because I very recently stumbled upon a fascinating article on Yahoo that was released on February 25th, 2022 in their finance section by Carrie Hannon about unclaimed property, specifically retirement accounts. And I'm linking the source, of course, to this episode. When I started reading the article, I thought it would be really timely to talk about because given the state of our country and world, there's been a lot of people leaving jobs and moving on to other things. They're actually calling it the Great Resignation Movement. And many positions, as part of an employee benefit package, offer a retirement plan like a 401k, 403b, IRA, etc. In the shuffle of leaving a job or moving to a different job, there sure is a lot going on, right? We've all been there. Just when you think, how on earth could people forget about money? Well, they do. Sometimes people truly forget the account even exists. And sometimes people think, oh, it's only got a couple thousand in there. I'll get to it. I'll just leave it there for now. Then they do forget about it. Actually, according to some research conducted by TIAA, 1/3 of people have left a retirement account at a past job. As the Yahoo Finance article states, quote, the smaller the account, the more likely it is overlooked, end quote. But think about when you add all these accounts together that are forgotten about and overlooked. That's a lot of money. Then, when those people forget about those accounts, that is when sometimes people get careless, they start not responding to communication from the companies, and ultimately, as a result, lots of money ends up heading to the state's unclaimed property fund, wherever the person resides or was last known to reside. As the Yahoo Finance article shares, the accounts that are forgotten about and ultimately end up in unclaimed property funds may, quote, balloon in the next few years, end quote, due to the Great Resignation Movement. And I think that's a really good point. That's a very valid point. Beyond this point, a study was conducted by an assistant professor of risk and insurance at the Wisconsin School of Business, and this Yahoo Finance article references this study. The study showed that a whole additional chunk of retirement accounts are kind of technically abandoned, as in the owner has very, 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 very likely forgotten about them or has passed away. But the account is still at the institution that holds the retirement account and not made its way to the unclaimed property fund, mainly because the institution may not have put two and two together yet. They probably should be handing them over to the state's unclaimed property fund, but maybe they haven't been notified of the person's passing. Maybe they haven't realized it's been X period of time and it should be handed over. The professor that conducted the study shared, quote, "We found that nearly 3% of Americans have at least one retirement account that has been abandoned at age 73. And the median account holds nearly $6,000, with nearly a quarter of abandoned accounts being above $25,000 in value," end quote. That's such an interesting little nugget to me. That is so much lost money. Her study is super fascinating, so you should definitely take a look, and there's a link to her study in the source links for this episode. Another element of this situation is that sometimes the financial institutions change hands, and they do it so often that it's difficult to keep up with who even currently holds the retirement account. After all, if you're like a lot of Americans, we're all working hard to make ends meet. That many don't really track the changing institutions that manage the employer-based retirement account. We're just going to work, or getting up, going to work, going to bed, and just not putting a lot of thought in that sort of stuff. And maybe the account started with, say, American Funds, then went to Wells Fargo, then went to Morgan Stanley, then went to, etc. And I see this happen all the time too with life insurance companies. So then when you're asking, okay, who holds my retirement account? You're thinking, well, that's a great question, self. What if a tragedy hits and you become incapacitated or pass away? If you yourself did not track the last place that held your account, it's probably not a high probability that your family or whoever has to step in and take care of legal affairs, they're not going to have any idea of where they are either. And then what happens? Well, possibly the subject of this episode. It could end up in unclaimed property. Of course, once it hits unclaimed property, like we chatted about earlier, it's still your burden to make a claim and get your money back. According to the Indiana Attorney General's report that I referenced earlier, it shared a little bit about the efforts their office makes in trying to get the property to the rightful owner. Those efforts include, annually, for example, they release a lengthy publication of all the names that hold unclaimed property. Specifically, it claims they publish it in the newspaper in the county that the person was last known to reside. The office also participates in various events to kind of get the word out about unclaimed property. So they participate in events like the Indiana State Fair, Library Days, the Indiana Black Expo, etc. They also have a full-time staff member that is supposed to proactively be looking for owners of unclaimed property, and they send out letters to owners of unclaimed property to at least the last known address. So back to the Yahoo Finance article, it shares something that I was actually kind of unaware of. They claim that lawmakers have attempted to introduce and pass legislation to help individuals be able to track accounts through a national clearinghouse. That so far has not gained any traction. Side note, if there was such a national clearinghouse, that would be so helpful because so many clients, especially after people fall ill or pass away, they're totally clueless about assets. And what is funny about this national clearinghouse idea is that I've actually said so many times to clients how nice it would be that such a thing would exist, and I didn't even know that they've actually talked about doing it. I suppose I can see why some would not be thrilled about it. I mean, it's a definite disclosure of some very private things, and we all know how private people are in general. And I mean, this national clearinghouse would have a whole lot of information. And along those lines, can you even imagine the public outcry if this national clearinghouse got hacked into? Oh my gosh. And actually, along those lines, there is a free online searchable resource called the National Registry of Unclaimed Retirement Benefits that if the employer and or the financial institution that manages the employer's retirement plan registers themselves and the former employee, it's a resource to find forgotten about retirement accounts. Interestingly, the Yahoo Finance article, when discussing this resource, shared that the registry is operated by PenCheck's Trust, which is a retirement plan benefit distribution processing provider. That's a mouthful. But it does require, when you search for retirement accounts, to enter your social security number. And I find that interesting because it's kind of almost like a clearinghouse for retirement plans. And heck, they must have your social security have your social security number to confirm it's you. And I'll put a link to the registry in the source links for this episode if you care to take a look. There are a few other resources directly through the government, like the Department of Labor, where you can request to be connected with a benefits advisor who will assist if a former employer has gone out of business or filed bankruptcy or even been acquired by another company, like when I talked about earlier about companies buying each other out. The Department of Labor also has what they call an abandoned plan search, where you can find where accounts have been closed or are in the process of getting closed and probably handed over to the state unclaimed property. As a last resource, besides the unclaimed property division of your respective state, of course, is that the Pension Benefit Guaranty Corporation has a database of searchable unclaimed pensions. When I looked at their website, I was looking to see if they had a search option, kind of like the National Registry of Unclaimed Retirement Benefits. And when I looked at their website, it looks like you have to call. So I don't believe their stuff has anything that you can search online, which may protect things a little bit more from a privacy standpoint. I found today's topic to be really interesting for some reason, and I hope you did too, of course. When I was doing the research, a little fun nugget I found in the Attorney General's report from Indiana, they shared that they even collect things like tangible personal property, so like jewelry and antiques and toys and video games. I don't know why that seems so funny to me. I imagine this warehouse of all this random stuff. And they even have what they call exempt property, which is collected but not reported. So those are things like reservation deposits that were forfeited from hotels and rentals, prepaid cards, gift cards, business to business credit balances. So I want to know what happens to all that stuff then. Anyway, okay, let's wrap this current trends, current events episode up, shall we? Next week's topic is we are back to estate planning of the rich and the famous. And on that episode, we're going to be talking about the iconic Marilyn Monroe. And we will talk about her next time and her estate and what went on following her passing. Until then, talk to you then and stay well.